Hi, my name is Gabriel Baliyat. I'm a student at BCIT, and today we're going to be talking about solid-state drives, or SSDs. We're going to be covering what solid-state drives are and the different form factors they come in. We'll be looking at the many advantages of choosing SSDs over hard drives, and we're going to be looking at the different technology and interfaces of SSDs and how it is has changed over the years. So what are SSDs? SSDs are storage medium similar to hard drives um, that are used to store anything from documents, music, media, anything that would be created and need to be stored. SSDs were created to relieve the bottleneck of hard drives, as hard drives were severely handicapped by their speed, which um, is a very important factor nowadays, as many people are spending less time on waiting for stuff to happen and are more relying on quick action. So let's look at the different form factors SSDs have. The first form factor we're looking at is the 2.5 and 3.5 inch form factor, which is contained in a disk that uses the SATA cable that connects into the motherboard, usually found on PCs. 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch drives are pretty common in most PCs and even in laptops, some of the older ones, and it still have been around for quite a long time. Although it has a limit of a read and write of 600 megabytes per second, which is most overcome with the newer standards, first found in the M.2 form factor, which is a little disk that you can find that inserts into the slot in laptops and PCs. The main advantage of using M.2 is that it is much faster, as in it connects directly into the motherboard, therefore relieving the latency and increasing performance of using it. The other main capability of it is that it is small. It is small and thin, which helps it to be inserted into small thin and light devices, such as laptops, which allow the overall design to be much thinner and more efficient. The last form factor of SSDs is the PCIe, or the Peripheral Component Interconnect Express State interface, which also allows an SSD to be plugged in directly to the motherboard, therefore getting directly to the CPU and relieving latency and increasing performance, which is used for high performance cases such as video and photo editing, and for even in like data servers. So why would you choose an SSD over a hard drive? There are many reasons, but I think the most common thing that people would say is the speed. And the speed is one of the main things about an SSD that people would choose. The speed of an SSD will always be much faster than a hard drive. Doesn't matter which different interface or which different form factor you use, it will always be faster and feel more responsive than a hard drive. SSDs usually range in about 600 megabytes per second and up in terms of read and write speeds, compared to the very measly 120 megabytes per second read and write on a regular hard drive, which is much slower. The speed of an SSD is one of the things that you can do to upgrade an old machine, to kind of breathe new life into it. Replacing a hard drive with an SSD in an old machine like a laptop or a PC is one of the best things that you can do to breathe new life into it and to make it feel more snappy and responsive. The other advantage of choosing SSDs over hard drives is the reliability. SSDs are much more reliable in the fact that they have no moving parts. SSDs are made up of chips that are stored on a board that is much faster to connect with and much faster to read and write data to and from the drive. Hard drives have a spinning platter and a spinning head, which is how they read and write data to it. But unfortunately, due to the way that they communicate, they're much more prone to failing or sudden data loss. So SSDs are able to overcome that in that part, and they also are self-maintaining as they run a command every so often called trim. Trim helps SSDs to relocate files next to each other that have been fragmented in order to maintain the performance speed of an SSD, and also to increase the longevity of it, so the drive will last longer. The last main advantage of an SSD is the pricing, and I would normally not say this years ago, as many people have avoided choosing SSDs over hard drives due to the pricing, as they used to be much more expensive than hard drives, but that's changed. SSDs have become a much better, more viable solution than before, as the prices have gone down. In fact, that you can find a 512 gigabyte SSD just under $100, which is a pretty good value. And even if you want something more, if you want more capacity in that, maybe a 1 terabyte SSD for storing lots of things in it, you can just pay just a little over $100 to get it. So there's a lot more value in choosing higher capacities than it was a couple years ago. So let's look at the different kind of technology features of an SSD. The main thing, the first thing being the interfaces, which is how they connect and communicate to the computer. The first one, which was first invented, was the SATA interface, which is still widely used today and is common in most computers. But the main fallback of SATA SSDs is that they're capped by their read and write speeds of around 600 megabytes per second, which still is fast by today's standards, but there are much newer standards that overcome that flaw, mainly with the PCIe NVMe standard, which is used widely in it's used widely in the both M.2 and PCIe form factor, but even in newer 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch SSDs. This allows the SSD to operate at 3,500 megabytes per second read and write, which is much faster reading and write speeds, and allows for much more responsiveness for high performance needs. And as technology has evolved for SSDs, more manufacturers have been learning ways to cram more memory cells onto small and smaller boards, which allow the form factor to be small, but also allow it to be more efficient and to pack more space into it. One of the methods being something called 3D NAND, which is what happens when you slice slice into the silicon that makes up SSDs to cram more memory cells into it, which therefore increases the amount of space and increases the storage that a SSD has. So overall, SSDs are much more viable and much better solution than hard drives were, especially in the present world. Choosing an SSD is much easier than before, with many different selections, different price points, with many different capacities to suit your needs. And even if you don't think you need an SSD, just think to yourself about all the different microtransactions that you do every day, from opening a file, booting up the system, or reading and writing to the file to the drive. Think of all the time that adds up when you do these tasks, and think of what the SSD can do, especially in making especially when making the tasks feel much quicker.